Hey, today I want to talk about my 5 favorite drum moments from the new Paramore album, This Is Why. The drums on this album were played by Zac Farro, and I think it's such a cool evolution to see his career from when they started as a band, like the pop punk, emo kind of vibe, to now where they're using drum sounds that are like punchy and gushy and low and so cool, so different from their earlier records, but still the super creative part writing is there. So let's get into 5 moments that I think are really cool drum moments on their new album. So first up, I want to talk about the drum groove on Figure 8. This really all throughout the song, but I isolated in the transcription that you can download for free in the description around the 25-second mark and around like the 1-minute mark. I think that this is such a cool groove because it uses a lot of syncopation and it's a really tight groove. The thing to watch out for is the of beat 1 kick drum and the E of beat 2 snare drum. It's really kind of harder than you might think to lock those in and make it feel good. It's really easy to not quite play them precisely and kind of have it swing a little bit. And this groove is not really swung at all. So I'll play the beat really, really slowly. I think that's such a cool groove. The very beginning of the measure is like really, really syncopated, but at the end of the measure, it's just like normal groove. And then in the second example, around the 1-minute mark, during the turn before the second verse, I believe, there's this cool fill. Beats 1 and 2 of the measure are just kind of normal 16th note fill. And then there's a hi-hat kind of accent on the E of beat 3. So he's kind of taking that groove thing that he's doing on beat 2, which is the snare drum on the E, but now he's kind of, instead of like breaking on beat 3 or breaking on beat 1 where you would kind of normally predict it, he's breaking on the E of beat 3, which is kind of cool. So that fill in that last measure is and you can see in that second example, he's adding more ghost notes. And again, I think so many of the drum moments on this album are cool because if you pay attention, it's the little things that make all of this stuff glue together and just make them like really great parts. Second moment that I want to point out is This Is Why. This is in the pre-chorus, I think, around the 45-second mark. I think not only is this album so cool because of the parts that Zac wrote, but I think it's really, really cool because like in this pre-chorus, there's a lot of, there's a drum set change almost. It might be that his main snare and rack tom are like normal, and then where his floor tom would be, it's another kind of higher tuned, open, kind of ringier snare that he goes to play the pre-chorus because it's got this busy little drum part and, slowed down, it sounds like this. So the things to watch out for here are there's a snare drum kind of accent, backbeat, whatever you want to call it, on the end of beat 2 in most of these measures. There's some little ghost notes to watch out for. And then on beat 4 of that first measure, you're playing snare drum accent on beat 4 with the ride cymbal. Then you're playing a ghost note on the E and a ghost note on the And I also just think that this is a great use of like ghost notes. He doesn't play ghost notes through every single measure all the time. The 2 30-second note ghost notes are kind of like falling into the end of beat 3. They kind of just fall into that kick drum, and I think that's a really cool use of ghost notes. So that's my second drum moment that I wanted to highlight. All right, drum moment number 3 that I want to kind of point out is The News. This is around the 25-second mark of The News. it's not really that complicated. I just love that, it's a quick tempo, but because he's using drums that are tuned the way that they are, they're tight, they're punchy, and because he's playing them kind of delicately, he can get away with playing a drum part like this. So slowly it sounds like. And the two things I really like about this are beats 1 and 2, where it's those of like the first measures, which is, that kind of quick hi-hat. So I love that part. And I also love just kind of the syncopation. Again, you're getting like snare drums on the end of 4 and just this whole thing it's a 2-bar loop that when you isolate just one of the measures, you're like, I don't know, that's too busy. But when you put both of them together, it just lays out in this perfect kind of way. So. Fourth drum moment is from You First around the 2-minute mark, and I really like this. Mostly I like this because of the fill that he plays. But I also like the groove because it has some syncopation. But the fill, it's not that crazy. It's just 16th notes, but it's the way that he plays them. I think in that recording, it's such a perfect, again, if you look back at early Paramore stuff, it was just kind of like the drums sounded amazing, but I think they were using a lot of samples and the drums just sound like so powerful and in your face and loud. And here, this fill is like such a crazy contrast from that earlier stuff because this is like very clearly not samples. And the dynamics that he's using for this fill, that first measure it's an accented floor tom and then those ghost notes on the snare, like really, really quiet. And then in the second measure, when it's snare, snare, rack, rack, floor, floor, it's loud. So built into this fill, there's like this nice dynamic like crescendo. And that makes a huge difference. That's totally different than. Who cares about that? But this, it's in the midst of all the groove. Such a great fill, in the dynamic that he uses is so great. And I also like that, this fill is in such contrast to this groove where like really he's only playing 8th notes on the hi-hat and snare drum on the backbeat. And then accenting kick drum with the riff every other measure or so. And then this fill comes in and it's just so perfectly placed and the dynamics are perfect. And again, it's just such a huge contrast from, the still great, but totally different drum part writing that was going on earlier in Paramore's career. And finally, around the 30-second mark of Liar, you have this really cool, really delicate drum part that is actually way harder to play than you might think. The tempo's not that quick, so you might see it and go, oh, this will be easy, but the drum part sounds like this. And there's a lot going on here. So first of all, the hi-hat, the kick and snare part, it's 1E, 2E, 3E, 1E, 2E, 3E. And that can be hard for people that aren't used to playing things on the E's because you'll have a tendency to like really want to rush the 2 kick drums in a row, really want to rush one of the snare drum notes, and it'll just make the whole thing like not quite lock in and sync up like it's supposed to. But the other thing that can be challenging about this groove is the hi-hat part, getting it to perfectly lock in with the kick drum, because that hi-hat lift it's kind of like a little triangle part, and you have to perfectly lock it in with the E's and the E's on the kick drum and the snare drum. If you don't quite lock the hi-hat in with the ease that the kick are playing and the ease that the snare's playing, you're going to get these flams, and it goes from being this delicate, beautiful little kind of drum groove to this thing that just doesn't feel good and starts to distract you. But when you lock those kick drums and snare drums with the hi-hat lifts, it just becomes this like nice, delicate bed of music. And again, the thing I really, really like is early Paramore stuff. A lot of the drum parts were written to lock in with when I listen to it. It sounds like the drum parts are really trying to lock in with the guitar parts, which traditionally funk music, even like, swing music, like you're really listening to the bass player. But I think this kind of like emo, pop punk, whatever we want to call their early stuff, the thing that stands out to me is so much of that music was locking in with guitar parts. And this groove also perfectly locks in with the strummy guitar part going on. It's just in a totally different way than those earlier songs. And this drum part is just really, really cool. And again, if it's played with too heavy of a hand, if the E's and the hi-hat lifts aren't quite locking in correctly, it's just like this groove played like this. That doesn't lay the same foundation as if you could, it would really mean the world if you would like, subscribe, do all that stuff. Subscribing, liking, commenting, it really does help this channel grow. So, do all of that. I'd really appreciate it. Link in the description for the free PDF of the sheet music that we covered. And happy drumming. I'll see you in the next one.